17 questions with Bocce. 17 questions with Bocce.
Welcome to 17 Questions with Bocce, episode 3 with special guest Notorious Raven. How are you doing this evening, Raven?
Doing all right. Thank you so much for having me here.
Absolutely. Hey, so one of the biggest things that I got feedback on from folks watching this series is that they wanted to know how to contact people or like where to follow people like in the front end of our time together. So just didn't know if you could tell folks like where can they find you and also tell us a little bit about who you are and especially for those folks who might not know who you are yet.
Thank you. I'm primarily here. YouTube is just underscore between Notorious and Raven.
Yeah. How about TikTok? Are you still doing TikTok or no?
Yeah, TikTok is the username here, Notorious Raven, all one word.
Okay, because that's where I met Raven. We Raven and Elsridge sang me and Alicia sang me a lullaby when I
Yeah,
fell
I've
asleep on a
almost forgot
live.
about it.
But yeah, so I had I was doing a live with Raven and Elsridge and Alicia, and I fell asleep. I had done a little bit of an errand, came back into the room. I had turned off my camera, and I said, you know what? I'm just gonna lay down for a second, just close my eyes for a little moment. It was not a little moment. Next thing I know, I'm waking up, and I was like, did I fall asleep? I don't know what exactly I said. And they were just cracking up. And they're like, "You gotta re-listen to your live," which I did and heard the singing, the lullabies. It was pretty
It
awesome.
was the funniest, but we didn't want to tell her because we just wanted her to watch the video, but it made it worse than what it was because she was getting like really worried that like, no, what happened? We're like, no, just watch the video because we wanted her to see the comedy of it as opposed to like breaking the comedy but it just yeah,
Yeah, no,
it
I
was
was
good times.
worried because they were being very vague about what they did. I'm like, "What did you do?" And they're like, "You just gotta watch it. You just gotta watch it." So so that was my one of my favorite memories with Raven on TikTok. But Raven, if you could tell folks a little bit about who you are and what you're about.
Oh my gosh, I've actually been on social media in this way talking about things for a little a little longer than I'd like to admit. I started in the middle of COVID shutdown, like a lot of people did, and I didn't really make content, but I felt urged to make content at the height of Black Lives Matter. And so that's most of my content is about social justice. It's oddly taken a spin, but still oriented to social justice and the reason why I talk about anything. Um, just because I feel like there's a lot of details and information that people don't have to operate with, and so I try to offer uh, information in relation to social justice and interpersonal relationships that people don't have, uh, as a basic 101 type of understanding. But on topics that are more a lot of times I'll end up in rooms where myself and some of my peers are doing the education and we feel like we're at like the PhD level
Mhm.
of understanding some of these social justice topics. And we're often confronted with the realization that we are trying to offer information and education to people who haven't even started the 101.
Mhm.
And so that's where I try to come in, bridge the gap, like trying to offer people who haven't even started the 101 to to recognize the on-ramp to getting towards these deeper understandings of the complexities of personal relationships and social issues, that type of a thing. So,
Which is really interesting because one of the things that we've talked a lot about, I mean, not necessarily you and I, but like I've talked about with other people is how pop culture is a great kind of on-ramp in a little ways because people think pop culture is a superficial conversation. But in
mhm,
reality, it lends to deeper conversations. And so,
absolutely.
one of the first questions I usually ask the content creators that come on board here is, what made you decide to start creating content about the Blake Lively versus Wayfarer case?
Oh my gosh. This is I was really trying to be a bystander in all of this and just watch it, but my what I do in my personal life, for the most part right now is, in my own personal time, I work with a theater company, and that theater company was started in the early '70s, and it was started by a woman who took over, the theater in Washington, DC, and she revamped that and made it into this big behemoth of a place. But she started this legacy at the theater that I still work with, um, that the new leadership for that organization has tried to pick up where she has left off. And everybody who works there is extremely professional in their position, in the capacity, what they do, and how they contribute. And my first tip off to what I wanted to speak on this in this case, and that I knew that there was something that wasn't being spoken of or honored, was that the statements that she was making were things that we in the theater community, like, we wouldn't do that. We would not say those type of things with, around, or towards our fellow colleagues, because in a lot of ways it encroaches upon and disrespects and demeans the professional capacities of all of the different roles that people play behind the scenes in the production of anything. And so the fact that she was making these broad statements that were really kind of disrespecting and stepping on the toes in a lot of ways of the other professional positions behind the scenes, it was the first thing that started to get me frustrated. And so that was that was the starting point of, yeah, I don't really trust that these statements are accurate, I guess, is what really compelled me to start talking about it. Because in a lot of ways, the claims that were being made were also saying that a lot of people in their professional capacity either weren't doing their jobs, failed at their jobs, or were just not performing in a professional capacity. And so that really bothered me, because this is also on the heels of the SAG strike, and knowing that there's all of these other things that the arts industry has really been fighting for. I was just like, so that was the first reason why I even spoke up in relation to the case at all.
Wow, you know what? I guess never realized that was what compelled you to do, because I don't know where in your journey you had already been by the time I just like found you and I was like, "Oh," and enjoyed your stuff. I'm trying to even just remember. I think you were doing some stuff when I first discovered you maybe
Well,
on
so
TikTok.
the funny thing was is that, so this when I came into this case, it was somewhere between Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Mm,
And it was just because of all of the hubbub of, like, where is he? Like, why isn't he there? This is his movie. He's the
mhm.
director. And at the time, I was so confused, because I was like, I usually know more about movies like this and things that are coming out. And I could not for the life of me figure out why I was missing this big chunk of time. And then I was like, oh, because I was working on a play for the same theater company I was just talking about. So from the time of the premiere until when I had free time in around Thanksgiving to Christmas, I was basically in the basement of a theater where we didn't have Wi-Fi, we didn't
Don't
have
say
access to our
basement.
phone.
Did you just say
I know,
basement of a theater and not
I know.
realize what you just said?
I know. So I was like, we were in rehearsals, we were doing all of this stuff. I couldn't scroll on the internet, and uh
Did you see
so I
Justin
just
there?
I know. If only I had known, I would have had a little cutout down there with us. Um but yeah, so I was so baffled, because I was like, I haven't even heard anything, and I couldn't figure out where the missing time was. And then I realized, like, oh, because I was working on this big project and this big play, so of course I didn't have any. So then I felt like I was racing to catch up with everybody else on, what happened, like, how did we get here?
That I mean, I'm still amused over the basement comment because you weren't even thinking about probably that whole thing, but the minute you said basement in a theater, I'm like, Justin, you saw Justin down there. But so what lens? And it sounds like there's different kinds of lenses and perspectives you're coming at this with. But what lens or perspective do you bring to this case that shapes how you talk about it?
Originally, it was the angle of theater, and that it was really offensive to me. And that was some of my earliest content that I was saying is that, excuse me, if I had certain things that were happening behind the scenes, um, the way that Blake presents it and the way that she says it, she's really saying things that diminish and also are offensive towards other people and their capacity behind the scenes. And then from there, it was like, as more evidence, more things came out, the more I realized, you know, my strong suit that I've been trying to lean into is my pattern recognition. And so
Mm.
there's a lot of people who haven't been able to look at this and see the patterns, which is astonishing to me because the ability to see patterns is, like the ability to breathe. So when I when I started to look at everything, I was like, let's make some sense out of this, and I'll at least point you to the direction of the patterns that I can see, and lay them out for you in the clearest way possible based off of the prior information that we have. So a lot of piecing together interviews, articles, etc., using things that were as close to firsthand information as I could possibly get to paint a better picture of a pattern.
Oh, I love pattern recognition. I think Blake really has particular patterns, and some of the reasons I've been able to predict some of the things that would come out
Yeah.
before they came out was simply not because I was smarter or anything. I literally am a pattern recognition
You
person,
see
and I
the
was like,
patterns. Yep.
if this person does this, the chances are high they're gonna do this and this and this. And she's been like clockwork. She has fulfilled every anticipation I have had that she's going to act like. So a part of me is like, am I really fearful about any certain things, or is she just going to keep with her character that I've seen throughout this process? So it's kind of cool to meet another pattern. Well, not meet because obviously we obviously know each other in the TikTok world and all that stuff, but another person that has that pattern recognition. I love people who are pattern recognition people because you just kind of look and like you get it, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I think that's one reason why it's always baffled me when it comes to interpersonal relationships, because I, until recently, did not recognize that I was somebody who recognizes patterns.
mm,
And
mhm.
so when I'm trying to say things in conversation with people, it's been very frustrating, and it's caused a lot of conflicts and problems in interpersonal relationships and dynamics because other people don't get it. They don't see it as plainly as I do. And how do you explain to somebody, especially if you don't have access to articles and interviews, and and you can't piece them together for other people in real time? It's really hard to explain to somebody like, "Oh, I know what this is and I know exactly why." Because much like this case is teaching us, there's a lot of people who are very committed to narrative and narrative only. And to convince them out of that reality is almost impossible, as we're seeing with what's unfolding in this case. And so it's, I think this is one of the reasons why I do lean into pop culture, is because it's a mirror of who we are, and how we interact with other people. And when things go awry, we have the ability to look at those patterns and offer insight not only to ourselves, but also learn about each other. And like, why didn't this interaction go well? Where could we have maybe corrected course or done something different to avoid this huge blow up?
I mean, definitely there were. I always feel like there were always different off ramps that could have happened all along the way. So when people tell you your content resonates with them, what do you think that they're connecting to the most?
Oh man, I think all throughout this case, there's been a lot of different times that that has happened. A lot of different people have given me feedback on many different posts, but underneath it all, the other lens that I look at this through is my experience of having been in abusive relationships.
Mm,
And so that was another big reason why I was speaking up on this is because of one, Justin came into this to talk about and give an opportunity to elevate the voices of survivors. And throughout this case, that is something that continues to be kind of like paved over. And so I am continuing to reassert and give the information of, if we were looking at this from a social justice standpoint and still trying to empower survivors, um, these are the things that I have seen. These are the things that I know. So when people have reached out, it's usually in relation to what I've talked about, to trauma and abuse, and especially when it comes to the type of content that was uh, in relation to the story of It Ends With Us.
mm. Um, well, are you ready for some questions from some of the folks that put in some questions for you?
Let's do it.
All right. So one of it comes from Out of Ideas. How will seeing the use of PR in media change how you consume online content and what you are shown in the future?
It already has. My gosh, it is so wild. It is so revealing to me. I say this with the caveat that I have always looked at PR, well, media of salt, because I, until this case, didn't realize how much of it was steered by PR. I could just get that sense that there was some form of, polishing of image, that sort of thing. I didn't know directly that it was often tied to PR, if not specifically hired PR. And so this case has really unearthed all of those patterns and really unearthed the strategies, and now it's solidified for me. This is why I have been reticent to just accept an article or accept, you know, interviews and that sort of thing for face value. It's made me really look at, like, okay, what lies beneath this and what is surrounding it and what is the bigger picture if we zoom out and try to see all of the pieces that are moving with this. And so in that regard, moving forward, I mean, I've already done some of the pattern recognition to take it and look at, all the way back to the early 2000s to uncover some of the things that we're currently seeing happen in this case. So it's not just current and moving forward, it's even looking back.
Yeah. And it's kind of wild getting more information now, and some of the things get even clearer from the past, like because there's so much further context that we get. The next question is Bale_11. Why do you think people like us are so invested in this case? I find it weird to be on this side because each time I try to talk about the case with anyone, they don't seem to mind at all. So why do you think so many folks, now obviously everybody has a different reason, but what do you think is the underlying issue, or not issue, the underlying reason that we are so invested in this case?
Because we're all nosy.
Give us the tea.
But I don't think it's just that we're nosy. I think to some degree, like, we've all been in a situation where uh we've felt pinned in a corner,
Mm,
in an unjust situation. And whether it's a workplace disagreement or it's a personal relationship or even in our family life, I think to some degree we've come under fire for something that we never did, never said. And we've had these conflicts where a network of people have then joined forces and gone against us. And so we feel the injustice, we know the injustice, and we understand the inner workings. And I think that that's really what a lot of people, besides being nosy, what we've recognized and understood out of this is like, I don't see what you're seeing. So, and I think when it comes specifically to survivors, I think the other element here is that with survivors, a lot of us, we have not been able to achieve the justice or success with our plight to get that justice against the people who have attacked us and come for us. And so it's almost like this, you know, this hope that if Justin is able to successfully navigate this case and is able to get the justice he deserves out of this case, that in a way, that might be our only sense of justice for ourselves.
Mm. I mean, yeah, I do feel like I've heard that sentiment, right? Where it's like people see the injustice, people feel the injustice. And
Hmm.
so there is a slightly like that, or I don't know, like living vicariously. I
Hmm.
don't know if that's the right way to describe it, in hoping that justice will be administered, whatever that looks like. And it's kind of an interesting thing. I go back to my 17 questions with Bocce with Annie when somebody asked her, what does justice look like? And it's
Yeah.
kind of like, it's still a question that just rings in my brain, I guess, when I think about it. But that's not one of your questions, though. I mean, but the next two actually are going to be from Moonstar. So Moonstar
Okay.
asks, what was your turning moment, if you had one, when you didn't believe Blake?
Oh man, like I said from the very beginning, and I do want to put the disclaimer out there. When this first came to light, I wanted to I don't want to say that I was very pro Blake in this, but I know that at the beginning I was like, slow down and let's look at this and be careful with it. Because what I don't want to do is what we've seen with other cases where I'm just like, you know, and make a snap judgment without carefully looking at the inner workings and understanding and pulling apart, what potentially is narrative and what is truth. And so from the beginning, I really wanted to be in Blake's corner. I really wanted to make sure and be careful that if this were the issue that had actually happened and she had been harmed and the set was truly unsafe, that we were a part of making sure that a set is safe and that a person is safe towards women specifically on a set like this, because that is a problem in historically in this industry and others. And so I started off trying to be as impartial and diplomatic, but then the first tip off was specifically with the offense to the different people attached to this production. Because I know even in the small corner of the theater industry that I work with, um, there's a lot of advocacy for the professionalism of all of these different positions. And so for her to have made these claims, it was taking a strike at a lot of different people
Mm.
and essentially saying that like, oh, these people just didn't do their job at the bare minimum. That's like the kindest way those statements were saying that about these people, but on the worst end of the spectrum, they were highly disrespectful and like it was almost impossible for me to believe that this many people were not doing their part in a professional capacity on a set like this.
Mm. Good point. I mean, it did make me wonder at times if Blake understood how many people it genuinely took to make a set run, because there
Mhm.
seemed to be a disregard for all the rules. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, maybe the first hint is claiming that there was no audio. I was like, look, I've never worked in the theater, I've never worked in movies, but I know that there's got to be audio. That
Somewhere.
honestly looked like warning bells went off my head on that one, because I'm like, no audio? How is that even
Yeah.
possible? I think I probably even had a video that said that. How is that even possible? But anyways, Moonstar also asks, has anything that's been released confirmed your beliefs or changed them?
Let's see. It confirmed my beliefs. I I think as the case has worn on and we've started to understand her patterns of behavior, there's been a lot of things that confirmed uh what I had sensed from the beginning. And once you start to see her patterns of behavior, it was very easy to understand, like, okay, this is probably going to come next, or this is when things would happen on the docket or in the news. Then I knew, like, oh, okay, so the next day or two, then A, B, and C is going to happen. And sure enough, that's what would happen. As far as changing my mind, I I can't really think of much other than, oh, well, I guess the biggest thing that has changed my mind is the stuff related to Taylor Swift, unfortunately. And I
Mhm.
still struggle with that because I know there's a lot of us that we've bought into the branding and the image and the promises, I guess, of who she says she is. And as more information has come out, I just and it brings up more questions in me of like, was this intentional? Is this not intentional? Is this, do we take this for face value or do we have to dig deeper with this? So I think that's the only thing that has really changed my mind is my stance on the way Taylor Swift may or may not be involved. So,
Yeah, I agree with you. I definitely thought Blake Lively had played up the involvement of
mhm,
Taylor Swift and that
mhm,
Taylor was too busy on her world tour to care about this situation. And I think it was, now I'm not a Swiftie, so it doesn't devastate me emotionally in the same way that I think it has those that would consider themselves Swifties.
mhm,
But it definitely made me go, wow. So 'cause she does seem like a kind person, and obviously, as Blake Lively says, "We are an amalgamation," you know? But I mean, even though I laugh at that, it's still, like it's still true. As women, we are complex, um, but I think the thing that did the most damage to me in the way I saw Taylor Swift was the way she mocked Justin Baldoni's essay story.
yeah,
And now people going like, well, he's shared this story, therefore that people should pursue to know who this person is to even prove if it's true. And I'm like, for what value? He's never shared the name. He's never,
mhm,
he's never, so I said, is it to just discredit people that are, is it meant to discredit men who have essay stories? Is what, I mean, because what is the purpose? What is the
right,
value? In pursuing that? Well, he what's his right to share the story to a large audience? But like, were the large audience thinking, let's go find this person until this Blake Lively case? And so a part of me feels like she has emboldened a lot of people to to do harmful things to the other side in the name of clearing her name, which
mhm,
she sometimes acts more as a defendant than a plaintiff at times. But
mhm.
anyways, that's a side note on my part. But but Carol Snyder of Docket Update fame, actually, which is funny because Carol's going to be my next guest. Well, not my next guest, but
Yeah.
two guests away because I'm actually doing a special like episode with a new content creator that I've been following just recently, like this last week. I love her stuff. Dedicated Yapper. I don't know if you've seen Dedicated Yapper at all.
I don't think her content has come through my feed. I'll have to look for her.
Yeah, so I'm super excited. So Dedicated Yapper, I'm gonna interview on Monday and I'll put it up on Tuesday. But then Carol is gonna do the regular like on a Thursday and I'll upload it on a Friday. But Carol
Uh-huh.
Snyder of Docket Updates fame has asked, have any of your questions on the case been answered with the recent filings?
With the recent filings. Oh, look, oh my gosh, there's so much. I don't think I've even made it halfway through.
I know, right?
And and every time I think that I've I've found, enough, then I see somebody else's post and I'm like, "Where is that?" Oh my god.
Yeah.
Where is that? Because then I have to find the rest that attaches to that. I think the way that the most recent unsealed files have answered any questions is just linking together how did we get from A to B in terms of the turning on Justin
Mm.
situation, because that has been the biggest thing that it's like, I don't understand. How did she sink her hooks into so many people and then just turn everything completely around? So I think with the unsealing, that's given the most insight to the inner workings of that dynamic. And it's honestly, it's even more gut wrenching because one, we have the established pattern from the rumors of Penn Badgley and Gossip Girl.
Not even rumored. She's
And
the one
to
who was so proud to say it.
yeah, and
Said it
then
with her
to
whole
and
chest.
then to know that this is still a pattern that is happening, but know that it is so effective. That's the part that's just gut wrenching, because even worse is that they mostly admit they didn't verify.
Mhm. Mhm.
They just took her word and ran with it, and then began engaging in what is essentially punishment of Justin. And that just, I mean, to think that we've been through these things in our personal lives to different degrees, in different ways, and to know how, like, helpless we feel in those situations, but then to know that this person went through this on such a grand scale, and to know that it did things like erode the Vital Voices Award,
Mhm.
erode the relationships with WME, and because these are building blocks within a career that were just established for Justin Baldoni. And so to think that all of this extinguished a light as they were building up to what we would hope would be success in an industry. And the bigger insult to injury in that is he was doing it for the reasons that myself and other people have been engaging in the arts industry,
Mm.
because art heals.
Mm.
Art is power. And to think that they have tried to erode these building blocks of success simply because of a rumor that was not verified, that I cannot even put words to how devastating that feels, even from the outside, let alone what it must have felt like and still does feel like for Justin Baldoni, Jamie Heath, and Wayfarer as a whole.
Yeah. It is heartbreaking. I literally cried reading the email or the text message that he never sent Colleen. And
Yeah.
you know what's wild about Colleen? She's an interesting one, for
Oh
sure.
God.
Simply because Blake Lively stated that she did not request anyone to unfollow, right?
Hmm.
And I think even Isabella followed in line in saying that she wasn't coerced or whatnot by Blake Lively. But Colleen up and says, "Cause Blake asked me," So and the other piece of it is the whole book bonanza thing, and it's like
Yeah.
her saying that it was Sony. Like the reason was that um that Blake and Justin were not getting along. And
Hmm.
so Sony made the decision, and I'm like, is it Josh? Is it Josh? He's either one that made the decision. But even her letter at the premiere thing, going, I understand why Blake might not want to go to the premiere when she's watching somebody else take credit for her work. And it's like, Colleen.
Yeah.
But I was like, but where's the SH?
Yeah. No, and that's the biggest thing that is so infuriating, is that not a single person identifies like, "Oh yeah, he was being creepy and I could understand why Blake wouldn't want to be around him if he was being like that." Every single conversation is about what she was or wasn't getting her way.
Yeah. And I mean, there
Like,
are like hints of things like that here and there from like maybe Taylor in conversations with Taylor or whatnot. But even Isabella said that on the book Bonanza Time, there was no inkling of why Justin wasn't, the reasoning behind Justin not being there.
mhm.
The specifics of it. So it's really interesting. But anyways, the next three questions are from Yarn and Order, Sarah, who was also episode 2 a guest of 17 Questions with Bocce. And so some of these things you've kind of answered in a way along the way, but especially the the third question probably that she has. But let's go with the first one. How has your background and interest in mental health topics informed your understanding of this case?
Oh my gosh. And that's, I didn't really go deeper into this conversation though. So maybe this is where I do a little bit more of that. So I've I've looked at this also not just from my experience of being in abusive relationships, but because of what I've learned uncovering everything else, which is the reason why I was even doing the pattern recognition when it comes to Blake Lively and her actions and behaviors in this case. And it's because my biggest sense of warning out of all of this, I've tried to at least put this in a PSA way kind of a deal because there's so many people and none of it has ever been. I always have to put the disclaimer out. It's never been about diagnosing her or saying that it's this disorder or that disorder or any of that. It's always been from the standpoint of I learned so much about personality disorders when I was going through uh, the the beginning stages of uh, working with trauma therapists in terms of my abusive relationships. And it was so just with so many of us know so little about personality disorders and have such big misconceptions. There's a lot of people that talk about narcissism and narcissists and narcissistic abuse, but then so few people actually use the words according to their definitions or apply them in the appropriate way. And so a lot of what I've had to offer is because of what I've learned and what I've uncovered because surprise, I've I've had a lot of friendships even that personality disorders have been present, and what I've been learning is that because of all of the other things, that was a vulnerability I have obviously had and endured, and in order to break that pattern, you have to know what you're looking at. And so that was why I was trying to put this in a PSA kind of a way, because if you start to see these signs, if you start to see these patterns, and you realize that nothing that you say gets through to a person, changes, their perception or understanding of a circumstance, and, even kind of like the comment, that we talk about so much about like, "Oh, you're hot." And she spins it into like, "He said I was hot," but no, it was like 95 degrees in the room.
Mhm.
So if you're in the presence of somebody who is going to attach a completely different narrative to completely innocuous situations, and that's a consistent pattern that repeats over and over, these are often signs that you're in the presence of somebody who has a personality disorder. It doesn't matter what one it is, and giving people the knowledge and insight to realize if you find yourself in the presence of somebody like that, you know, unless you're a trained professional and you're an expert on personality disorders, etc., you're likely never going to end up in a perfectly safe or perfectly healthy situation in that friendship or that relationship. And it's more about uh, protecting yourself from further harm. Because as we can see with this situation, it didn't matter how much Justin Baldoni, you know, gave, offered, how much trust he tried to build. It didn't matter how far backwards he bent over. It was just this insatiable situation where he was always going to be in the wrong. And then even talking more made it worse. And then, all of the other relationships crumbled away. And so that's why it's kind of like trying to paint it from the picture of like, these are things that we should be paying attention to in our real lives and just trying to offer that information. And so when it comes to trauma, abuse, and mental health, I think the biggest thing, other than recognizing the patterns of this behavior, is also recognizing, how do you feel when you're butting up against a personality that does this? Because a lot of times we forget about ourselves. And I think Justin was in a somewhat unique situation where he couldn't just break break this connection and walk away from it. He had to complete this film and had to get through this project. But if we're in our own personal lives and we have that opportunity that we can say, this relationship doesn't restore me and doesn't make me feel like a bigger, stronger version of myself, that's when we can realize, like, maybe this isn't the situation I should keep myself in. So that's why I've tried to talk about pattern recognition in relation to this when it comes to uh the mental health aspects of this case.
Well, they kind of, the next question from Sarah touches on something that you mentioned. She says, "How does your research on mental health and narcissistic abuse specifically inform your research in the case?"
I'm like, let me put it this way. I got out of an abusive marriage in 2010, and I thought that was going to be the end of my need to research and whatever. I In the almost 10 years between leaving the marriage and then the next relationship that was as intensely abusive as it was, I thought I had done enough. I honestly thought that I had chosen somebody who was safe.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, that was not the case. And so when it comes to narcissistic abuse specifically, because I had had that 10 years of researching and figuring it out, but then also I think the silver lining coming out of it and why I offer the information that I do is that for as much education and learning as I did intensively for those almost 10 years and then still walked into an abusive relationship, I think what it's done is given me the ability to recognize not only like, it's so sad that Justin wasn't able to bring the way he wanted to tell this story to fruition because I think it is so needed. And I think, the problem is that he wasn't working with people who have the intense, knowledge of trauma and abuse. And so in that way, I could see the value of what he wanted to tell and what he wanted to present in this story. And unfortunately, because of all of that, you know, research and education that I've done, I can see how things have unfolded behind the scenes. Um, but then it allows me to offer that, in the content that I make and recognize certain power dynamics and offer that to the audience that engages with my content. And um I just it's kind of like I've now been through two stages of researching about it. And so having done the book side and now having gone through a personal lived experience, it's it's taken it to another level. And so I think it's equal parts like heartbreaking because I know the inner workings of what this must feel like for a lot of these people going through this. But then also the silver lining is that I can offer this info and in some way, be like an anchor point for people who are are caught in the chaos and have nobody who listens to them and hears it in a meaningful way. And so I think that's just what I've been able to do and what I'm trying to do also because with with a greater community, a greater society that is so uneducated and so ill-informed on these dynamics. It's just honestly, it's like the biggest reason why I'm like, I wish we had got Justin's version. So,
Mm.
that's why I've tried to apply this as much as I can to the content that I make in relation to this case.
Yeah, I'm really struck by how Blake Lively had told Taylor Swift it's a fun watch now.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yep.
is a story about domestic violence? Should that really be a fun watch? And
Right.
so it's very interesting. Now, the third question from Yarn and Order, you've touched on this a lot, but there might be a little bit more maybe that you have in addition to it. But she says, does your experience in theater offer any additional insight? And it seems to be the answer is yes. But is there anything else that you feel like I would like to communicate about how my theater background gives me additional insight into this whole thing?
With theater, it's not just the behind the scenes and knowing the professional capacity. It's also the standpoint of knowing what we as actors and performers, like why we engage with the industry. I know there are some people out there that are like super superficial and they're just in it for either the notoriety or in some cases the money. Like that's not the side of the industry that I'm in. But when it comes to actors and actresses, and what I love is knowing the people that I work with and the reason why we do the work that we do. Because I'll put it this way. In one season, we've been so committed to uplifting social justice in arts because we know the power of storytelling, of theater. We know the healing power of storytelling and theater. And one entire season, our theater troupe did nothing but stories of LGBTQ
Mm.
people, and it included uh, a nice Indian boy.
Oh.
And so we were so excited. We were so excited during that production, knowing that it had been picked up to be turned into a movie. So
Mm.
while those rehearsals were happening, we were like so excited to know about it. And what just what makes me so happy is that the way that we speak, myself and my colleagues who work at this theater, the way that we speak about social justice and the telling of these stories, um, a lot of times we are protective of the character and not just the character, but we're protective of the story and not just the story, but we're so protective of the message and who that message is meant to be sent out to. I'm going to cry at this part.
Mm.
So we had the play that I was in, uh, the one that came out right before It Ends With Us had happened. We had a bigger message and a bigger overall audience that we were sending out into the world with the telling of the story. And we had a screening and somebody came in, and at the end of the show, like we didn't realize that this was going to be the message. Our message was meant for a larger audience in terms of action towards an issue. And at the end of the story, this audience member, they were a young person, and they came up to us and they told us about their experience
Mm.
of having watched this play. And they said that they had no idea. they they didn't understand the weight and the impact of the issue that they could also possibly face, and they were like, this changed me.
Mm.
And we weren't prepared for that emotionally. So in the moment, we had to just be really thankful and grateful and thank them for offering their insight and whatnot. But it was, you aim for one thing in telling a story, and you don't even know like the other messages that are actually going to hit with other people. But again, it paints the picture of why we should be so careful and why we should be so protective of not only the characters, but the story and also the message, because we never know who's going to be in the audience and like how they're going to receive it. So to try to water down the telling of a story into something that's just profitable and that's just about humor and entertainment is really a disservice, because with the telling of the play that I was in, that that message, that was never going to happen in a conversation. Because it's a young person, I'll at least put it in this way. That was never going to be a conversation that a parent and a child would have,
Hmm.
that the parent would be effective in telling them, you should or shouldn't do this, you should or shouldn't do that, kind of a thing. And for them to have been struck so hard by a message that would have never happened in any other way was so moving to us that we were just like silenced.
Hmm.
And we just had to sit in that for a little while, because we were like, oh my gosh, we were just hoping to advocate for, the other element of this story. We didn't even recognize that it could actually be preventive. We didn't recognize that it could have had an impact for somebody who's not, the primary audience we were aiming at. And so my engagement with the theater and understanding acting, that's the other thing too, is that I don't hear any of that language coming from Blake. She's not defensive of the story. She's not defensive
Hmm.
of the character. She's not defensive of the message. And you can hear that echoed when you listen to other professional actors and actresses when they talk about roles and films that they've taken on. They they don't even talk about themselves. We, as actors and performers, when we talk about these stories, we don't even talk about like, oh, this is me. I want to do this for this story and this character. It's literally, you talk in third person, and you talk about the character as if they're a real living person. And like I wanted to take care of, like, if you're playing in Wizard of Oz, like I wanted to take care of Dorothy. I wanted to tell Dorothy's story authentically. And Dorothy is a person who, that is what you often hear professional actors and actresses talk as when they're talking about taking on the role in a theater production or a film. We don't hear that from Blake. So there's a whole lot of different layers and ways that my connection to theater and performance has informed me. And I just, there's a lot of things that are missing. It's not just the statements that she said, like, I have a hard time morphing into somebody else. I have a hard time becoming somebody else.
Hmm.
It's also in the language that she uses around performing, because we don't talk about her as if she's Lily. She's talking about I, and he as Justin
Hmm.
and not as Ryle.
Hmm.
And so there's this detachment, and almost like there's not a recognition that when she's on set, she's not supposed to be there as Blake. She's there as Lily.
Hmm.
And like not even recognizing, the shift between the camera's on, the camera's off, the camera's on, the camera's off.
That's so true. I mean, I remember in that dance montage, she was like, and he did this with the cameras on, and it's like, cause you're acting?
Yeah.
What do you mean? All right. So the next question is from, I think, Brina Born. So BrinaBorn said, will you consider doing a deep dive into the behind the scenes edits, including dailies the public does not see?
I mean, give them to me. I know that we've seen some of them. Um, I feel like, I don't know. the meat and potatoes is kind of outside of the behind the scenes, but if people are interested, I'm like, Give me the questions. What do you want to talk about? I'll talk. I'm a yapper."
I think maybe Brina might have heard you say it maybe in a live or maybe in a something. Did you ever mention this before about
I
wanting to
may
do a
have.
deep dive?
The problem is I have a 300-part playlist on my TikTok, so I've said a lot.
You need to bring some of those over
I know. So
to,
I'm
I mean, to
like, "Good
YouTube, you know?
lord." Yeah, and it's funny because 'cause I'm like, "Do I sit and listen?" I've at times, like, I've taken a longer shower, and I've let it autoplay while I'm in the shower,
Yeah.
and I got out, and I'm like, "Wow, that only got me to, like, 26."
I mean, out of 300? I mean, you know what? A lot of the folks that are on uh the majority of the folks that are like my diehard bocce folks are deep divers, long content, binge watchers kind of folks. So they would love they would probably love that if it was there.
300? 300 it autoplays, guys, so hit up my TikTok.
Yeah, so folks actually do have TikTok. Because sometimes there's people that are on both platforms. There's some people that are only on one. And so,
Like, also, if you do hit up that playlist, let me know if you see a growth pattern or just pure chaos, because I'm like, because it's kind of the same thing that I've seen with you, Bocce, where I'm like, I don't know if I want to do a look back on my own content, because it's kind of like, I know I've gone pretty hard for like one theory, and then something comes out and I'm like, oh.
yeah, I do laugh at my old ones. I really thought she was going to win certain things. And I was like, it's because she documented. And I laugh at myself now. Like, documented what? Documented her takeover? That's one word. I thought she had filed a formal HR complaint. I thought she had done all of these things only to find out, yeah, I had cake on my face. Is that the
I think
phrase?
my favorite moment with you, besides that, I mean, there's like a long and running list.
That was a fun. I said it with my full chest. I'm dead. No.
I will not forget that one. It was so funny because you were you were so convinced, and we were like, "Bocce,
I
no,
was so
no."
convinced. Can you tell the audience? Can you tell the audience what had happened? I'm so mortified. I'm so mortified.
It was so funny. I can't remember what it was that you were
It was
so
it was
convinced
Ryan
about.
Reynolds and his kid, and me
Oh yeah,
thinking
yeah.
for sure that wasn't what he said.
Because she was like fully convinced, and we were like, "No, Bocce, that's not no." And we couldn't find the content fast enough to like prove her wrong, and she kept going down the road of like, "No, no, no, it can't be, it can't be."
I
And then she's
said,
like, "I
I
bet my
bet
life
my
on
life.
it." And no sooner that she got it out of her mouth that we finally got to the content and played the clip, and she's like, "Well, guess I'm dead."
And Elsridge was like, "You didn't even fight." And I was like, "Well, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. So I guess I'm dead." Oh my word! I that's every time now when I'm like I'm willing to bet my life, and I stop myself. I said, "No, I'm not. I'm not a cat. I don't have 9 lives. I gotta stop doing that." One lesson learned. To never say something with your full chest without re-verifying. But the thing is, I
We
literally
were
listened to that,
trying.
and I and maybe that does show how, I don't know. Aldridge was like, Phoebe. I mean, oh well, now I just said my name.
Like, we tried so hard. We were like, "No, it really that's not no." And you were so convinced, so
I was.
convinced. And it was just it was how fast that it, like, escaped her mouth, and then she saw it, and she's like, "Oh, I guess I'm
I was mortified. That was so funny.
dead."
Oh my word. Okay. Whew. Okay. With that said, want to go to the next one, which is Rachel's view.
Okay.
Said, being indigenous, are there aspects of your experience that allow you to relate to the backlash Justin receives as a member of the Baha'i faith, given how indigenous peoples and beliefs are often misunderstood?
I'm gonna try not to cry. That's
Oh, no,
probably
no.
not gonna happen. Um, 'Cause that was kind of an argument that was happening today and unfolding. Uh, Somebody in the comments was like, "Oh, he's not even a brown person, and he's definitely Italian, definitely white, all of these other things." And I was kind of like, "Yeah, but it's not the way he self-identifies that matters. What matters is the thoughts, the beliefs, and perceptions of the person that he's interfacing with." And it's not just that he's played Raphael, it's not just that he's often identified as characters that are brown people, like even the Aladdin cartoon. Um, it's also that, she's made remarks about him saging people on set. And and knowing how she's acted and behaved with Jamie Heath, it's kind of like there's all of these little markers. And if you're not a person who has the lived experience of being a person of color, it's a lot harder to perceive these slights, these microaggressions, and even macroaggressions, because there's a lot of times that very overt things will happen to us as people of color, and people who who are not from our communities and don't have the lived experience of being a person of color can still look at something and be like, that's not what it was at all. Like, why is everything about race? And it's so infuriating because it's kind of like, you can only say that if you have never experienced it. And so what has happened to Justin and Jamie, I think it's another layer of why I have paid so much attention to this case, because I still experience it. I just watched a person who's close to my life, who's not a person of color, and they were actually coaching a younger person in my life, talking about uh, her superpower is the ability to cry when she's, trying to get her way for something. And I'm just sitting there like, you are not, because that was one of the big things a lot of people were talking about at the beginning of this case, is the white woman tears and how this plays out. And so I think in a lot of ways, you know, we won't know for certain if this is truly how Blake has felt, but we, as people who have experienced these things, endured these things, we know what we know when we recognize it when it happens. And so I think that's another reason why a lot of people have been following this and have been in Justin's corner trying to help, you know, clarify things. So I think in that way, yeah. Yeah.
I really think look for dedicated yapper. I think you will really enjoy dedicated yappers like content on TikTok. And as she brings up a lot of great conversations that kind of go along these lines. And so yeah, so it is, yeah, it is something that is hard to explain to folks when they don't have a specific lived experience. I remember growing up, I was incredibly sheltered, and
Mhm.
I don't think I even had language to understand even if things happened to me. Like it's like, oh, that person was just like mean or like whatever, but I didn't understand. Like I remember being at in high school And because I mean, again, I moved from the Philippines when I was 7, right? So I knew my life. I came from somewhere. So
Mhm.
so when people would ask me where I came from, that didn't sting as much for me as it did for my friend who was born here.
Yeah.
And she was like, "I'm never gonna they're never gonna see me as American because I'm not white, right?"
Mhm.
So, but for me, um, from the Philippines to America, not really knowing anything about racism or just those conversations, I didn't have the framework to understand. So when I was in the library and these two guys pulled their eyes back and said "Ching Chong Ching," and I was like, I was very confused. One, because why are they doing that? Also, not
Mhm.
my language. Also, I don't think that's a language at all. So all of these things went through my brain, and I remember telling my friend who was again born here, and I'm telling her
Mhm.
the story about like these weird boys that did this thing, and she's like, for her it was like, do you not understand what's happening here? And
Mhm.
and the reality is, I didn't have the language for it, and so sometimes people have racialized experiences, but don't even
Mhm.
realize it to some degree and don't have the language for it. Um, and then there's other folks that their whole life has been um not because of their race or whatnot has been politicized. Like they don't want to politicize their lives, but their
Mhm.
lives have been politicized by their very existence. They have
Yep.
to fight for their very existence to be recognized. And um so yeah, like you sharing that, your own experience, I know that's vulnerable, right?
Mhm.
um because sometimes people end up being dismissive. And one of the biggest things that I've always said to folks is like, just because it's not your experience, one of the biggest gifts you can give people is to allow the space to understand, like, just because it's not your own lived experience doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And
Exactly.
and so, um, so thank you for the gift
Mhm.
of your willingness to share that. It's not always easy, and it
Mhm.
is a gift. Vulnerability is a gift. And that is a vulnerable thing to do. So appreciate you being willing to share a little bit of that. Um,
Thank you.
yeah. Well, we're rounding up with 4 questions that has not from the audience, but just 4 other questions to give you. But how do you decide what information is solid enough to rely on versus what stays unresolved?
Oh my gosh. I think it's one, if it's a firsthand source.
Hmm.
So if it's statements directly from somebody, whether it's a recording, an interview, uh, a written document, that sort of a thing, and then just kind of using your best discernment of, how solid is this or not solid. And I think the other thing with the background for me, I've had to work in government to some degree, and I've had to make adjudications on issues. And in regards to making adjudications, you have to have, so many layers of, um, what's the word out? Not defense, but when you make an adjudication, you have to make a decision that can stand up to an appeal. So when I'm looking at something like this, if there isn't something that I can find a document that backs up a statement, etc., then it's a little bit weaker. So it's just kind of prioritizing what is firsthand information, what is secondhand, and what is something that we'll never really be able to verify. Yeah, it's just I think once you've made determinations on a case, not a legal case. I'm just saying in my government position, we still, had to stand up to appeals, but they weren't legal cases. But once you've been in a system like that where you have to present information and facts and have things to back it up, you kind of understand and you can prioritize information, what's stronger or strongest, and what is something that's just kind of flimsy, and we'll never be able to verify. And then also trying to figure out, because there's a lot of people that are like, oh well, look at how many women have come forward now. Okay, but none of this is dealing specifically what's being claimed.
Mhm.
So I I can't really use that to make a determination on what did or didn't happen between Blake and Justin. So,
Yeah. That particular pushing of, and I feel like it's disinformation, honestly, because people are out there
mhm,
saying he has essayed all these women. And it's like,
mhm,
that is the danger of somebody actively peddling a list of women's names and claiming that there's things that you can read that show something that it absolutely does not show. And people
mhm.
lap it up and never fact check. It's disturbing. It's and it's dangerous. It literally puts
Yeah.
people's lives in danger. Are there parts of the case where uncertainty remains? And how do you sit with that?
I mean, I think I've looked at this case well enough that I know what I know. And so the things that are uncertain to me, they're not really they're not things that are what's the word I'm looking for? They aren't part of the main complaint. They're kind of things that exist around the main complaint, and they don't really impact whether I believe that this actually happened or didn't happen. And I mean the bigger thing that bugs me is knowing that Blake never filed with the unions.
Mm.
And we as performers, and even when you look at the call sheet, it has the union contact. It has the place to file complaints right there. So it would be on the call sheet, which is a daily sheet that you get. So every single day you would be getting that information repeatedly, new every single day with that same phone number, same contact. And with as many people are as on set, I'm kind of like, whatever is left to uncertainty isn't information or details that would undermine my greater beliefs in regards to what has happened with this.
So it doesn't sound like there's really anything that is unaddressed. I mean, I finally
Mhm.
saw the Van Zandt subpoena and I was excited.
I know.
And I was
I
like,
know.
okay, so they straight up did ask for anything with it ends with us.
Mhm.
And I'm like, so Ryan does admit through that Van Zandt that that he's related to it ends with us.
Yeah.
As someone who's not part of it ends with us, he in essence admitted through Van Zandt that yeah, I'm deeply involved in this movie.
Yeah.
So I thought that
Yeah,
was
which
interesting.
that's that I think I think that's the bigger question outside of this that I have, because it's kind of like even from the beginning I was thinking, when the text messages started to come out, I was kind of thinking, is this really Blake on her phone, or is this maybe Brian on Blake's phone pretending to be Blake? And then the same thing. The same thing. Is this really Ryan sending this message on his phone, or is this Blake on Ryan's phone sending a message? Because some of the language, it's very muddy.
Mhm.
They talk very much like
Alike.
each other. And so at times I'm like, are they talking like each other? Because the whole did you read the scene that she wrote?
Mm-mm.
I did a post about it.
Mm-mm.
It's
Yep.
so bad. The comment about the husk.
No. No.
Oh my god. Oh
I
my
need to watch
god.
your was that on TikTok? Or is that
It's
also on
definitely
YouTube?
on TikTok. It is so bad. Maybe I'll find the specific one and send it directly to you so you don't have to find it.
Okay.
It is so bad. It's a scene that she rewrote, and it's typical Blake and her writing, or at least who we think is Blake and her writing, because then it's like, is this really Ryan? Just because of the word husk. And it's because the I'll put it this way. Because you read the line that says husk, and you think like it's the worst part of the whole scene that she wrote. And you're just like, what does that mean? Like, why would you? And then somebody put in the comments a screenshot of I think it's an email from Ryan, and
Mm.
she's like, she got it from Ryan. And then
Mm.
again, it just underlines the question of like, is this Ryan on Blake's phone, or is this Ryan writing these things, or is it the other way around, or is it a mix that sometimes
Yeah.
they're swapping each other's phones to send these messages? I don't know.
Um, but no, honestly, the Christy Hall letter, when she
Mhm.
says that was such an own goal, and people were like, own goal? That's what you would say in soccer or football you know. So it was kind of an interesting thing. It's like, is this written by Blake or is this written by Ryan?
Ryan.
Or did they co-write it? You know?
Yep.
Or is it or B- is Ryan's whole career because of Blake? Is
Mm,
Blake actually the funny writer? What if she knew she can't say it because people perceive it fine for Deadpool, but not for Blake? But what if she's the mastermind behind all of his funny quips? No, I don't think so, actually. Because I've seen
I mean, if we had actually seen her being funny, maybe I could believe it, but,
I
like, even when she's tried to be funny, it's such a fail.
yeah, it
It's
came out of my
actually
mouth and I said I
embarrassing.
take it back.
As soon as you hear yourself, like, "Yeah, that doesn't work."
The theory failed. Oh man. Um, okay. So let's see. What's the next question? Has covering this case changed how you think about public accusations?
Oh, this one is so hard, and I will tell you why this question is so hard,
Mm.
and it is because of Darvo,
Mm.
and it is because of my own experience of Darvo. However however, there is something to be said here in regards to how it does mirror my own situation. And the way that I'll put it is, I know I had my claims. I finally came to the recognition that I was in a factually violent and therefore abusive relationship, and that what I had been enduring was not only not okay, but I was actively trying to reconcile with what I had been experiencing. And when I came forward about what had happened, I did factually endure Darvo. The only thing that makes me think of this differently then is the success. The success is the common denominator in my situation with the Darvo, is
Mhm.
that the person actively engaging and using Darvo is the one that was able to get the greater power in the situation, which is, I mean, adds a layer of gut wrench, but then also in that way, like I've said before, a lot of us survivors were hanging on to this case because, you know, by proxy, this might be our only chance, our only opportunity if Justin is able to successfully get through this case and vindicate himself, that we might feel that same sense of justice. And so, I mean, because I'm 8 years out from my abusive relationship. And even to this day, people are like, it was so long ago. And I'm kind of like, it lives in your body.
Mm.
It is my everyday experience. I don't get to wake up and say, this was 8 years ago. My body tells me this could still be around the corner right now.
Mm.
My body, uh, there have been times where uh, an old item of his has fallen out of a drawer, or, you know, like I dig through the darkest areas of my closet and something from his is still there, and my body reacts as if it means he's there now. So I don't get to tell my body and my brain that that was 8 years ago. my body and my brain are still living as if he could walk around the corner at any moment. And I think with this situation, like it's there's so many layers that play into this. And when it comes down to the idea that, we hope to see that Justin sees his vindication out of this, that it's just kind of what we're holding on to. And we so desperately want to see that. And yet at the same time, it's gut-wrenching to think that when things got turned around on me, that the greater network of people were also like, I was scrutinized harder, and not scrutinized harder, but then also the whisper network, like what we've seen happen here, got activated and did the same thing to the point that even to this day, I I know the friends that I lost. I know the people that I lost because of the Darvo. And and same with this whisper network. Nobody verified.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody reached out and nobody said, is this true? Is this factual? And not only did they skip over the verification, but even if they had, like reached out and asked for any of these things, some of this stuff is, you know, like it happened behind closed doors. And I think in this case with Justin also, I think some of this happened behind closed doors in a way that silenced him, but it's also because you're so you're so afraid of doing something wrong, of saying something wrong, of things getting worse, that you get painted into this corner even tighter, and you just don't really know which way is out. So I think when it comes to claims, you know, there's been a lot of divisiveness with past cases and past claims. But I know what I know. I know I know two things can be true at the same time, and yet at the same time I know power dynamics. And I think the only thing really truly moving forward, if it comes to the question of accusations and truth and narrative, that kind of a thing, is really, leaning on what we've learned and coming back to the table every single time and making sure that we know what power dynamics look like, how they play out, understanding documented evidence versus, narrative, and then also understanding, did these people actually verify? Is there a way to verify? And then again, just really leaning very hard on the power dynamics, because I think in every single situation, the power dynamics are going to be the biggest tell. And even when I look back at some of the past cases that have been in the public eye, I'm kind of like, if you shut off all of the narrative, it and even if you take away some of the evidence, if you just look at the power dynamics, that almost entirely tells the story every single time. So I think coming out of this one, that's where I land, is power dynamics are the loudest indicator in any of these accusations.
Yeah. I mean, phew, it does drive the question that some people are like, well, he was the director and the co-lead and the financier, the co-chairman of the studio, all this whatever. But when you look at the fact that Blake Lively was like, they begged me to remove
Yeah.
Cherry from the movie, and it wasn't removed. You saw
Hmm.
all the things that Justin Baldoni gave her feedback that needed to be removed. They all stayed in the movie. You have Sony saying, please don't make her sign her contract because she might call Taylor and they get remove like that song. You see her PGA letter that literally tells you that she did everything, including HR, which is the most funny thing of all.
Yeah.
But
Like, if Justin was so in power, then tell me when he got his way.
mhm, mhm. People ask me
Point me
what was
to
his
one.
mistake. I said hiring her.
Yeah. Well, and I want to say that it was just hiring her, but then really in truth, I think the chain began with Colleen, unfortunately.
Mm,
And that's just because in another post I was talking about how I think the biggest problem that started the chain reaction that allowed any of this to happen was that Justin came for a story of intergenerational trauma,
mm,
but he came to a person and a crowd of people who don't have the lived experience of social justice
mm,
as their existence.
mm,
And so when he came for a story of intergenerational trauma and abuse that comes from a woman who, like, social justice isn't her priority, isn't her main thing, that was the first loose corner that got peeled up. And then the more that he walked away from a crowd of women of color and people who do social justice work, the more he walked towards women like Colleen Hoover, Blake Lively, Taylor Swift, etc. Because social justice is not their primary language that they speak, that was that's how he ended up in the hot water that he's in. I believe that if he had been working with primarily women of color, because like A Nice Indian Boy, oh my god, if you have not watched it, you
mhm,
absolutely have to watch it, and it's so beautifully told and so well done because the representation in front of the camera matches the representation behind the camera.
mm,
And I think the problem with telling the story of intergenerational trauma from people like Blake Lively, who admits that she doesn't have this experience, doesn't know about this type of existence, I think that when you have people like that that are trying to tell the story, unless they are committed, unless they are like the other professional actors and actresses in the industry who talk from the stance of protecting her story, of protecting the message, of protecting the movie altogether, you're not going to have somebody who's one, committed, and two, pliable enough to tell that story in the way that it needs to be told. And so what ends up happening is what we see throughout the Whisper Network is when Blake loses power, when Blake loses credit or perceives to lose credit and power, that's the issue. That's the issue that they all start to fight back against. And you hear the language that they speak and it's all me, my, I.
mhm.
It's not Lily. It's not about the survivors. It's not about telling the story of empowerment. It's about how much credit and power and control do I have behind the scenes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yes. Final question. What questions do you think the public should be asking, but largely is not?
What's missing?
Oh, I always say to folks, well, you ask what is missing. So I agree with you. What is missing? If they ask that question, what do you think they would find?
If you haven't seen today's post, or well, last night's post is doing the numbers. And I made that post thinking I was yapping into the void because I, like a lot of my posts lately, have just, we all saw what was happening in January and February
Hmm.
of 25, where a lot of us, we could say so little, something, inconsequential, and it just, like, it ran the numbers. And so I've been flustered with this new switchover and whatnot. And so I was just like, you know what? Because I did sit and think about that. What is missing? And most specifically, what is missing with Justin Baldoni's behavior? Because I was like, if we're going to believe that this guy is factually abusive, and if we are going to believe that he's pulling one over, and he did these things, what is missing from his behavior? And it made me realize he he, he never escalates.
Mm.
A factually
Oh.
abusive person, and what I talked about in the post that's doing the numbers is that my first appointment, like right after I started, trying to come forward about the fact that I was in a violent abusive relationship, I skittered into my regular therapist's office because I was trying to transition out of the trauma program into regular therapy and whatever. And because they only have so many resources for the trauma program. And so I went to my first appointment with my regular therapist, and I I was so intensely crying and activated and triggered because we were so close to the end of the relationship. And I told her, because she's like, "What are you here for? What do you want to work on? And why are you here?" And so in my hour appointment, I like poured out everything, and I told her everything that I had just gone through, everything that I just endured, and that I don't know where to go and what to do. And so I had told her about the violence. I had told her about all of these different things. And at the end of it, I just sat there and she just looked at me very matter of factly. And she was like, "Well, it sounds like we need to work on your self advocacy because it sounds like you weren't effective in asserting your boundaries and your rights in this relationship." And I knew in my body, I just sat there astonished, and I didn't know what had just happened, but I was like, "That's what you got out of this?" And I nearly lost it. I left that appointment, and either that day or the very next day, I know that as soon as I could get into my trauma therapist, I went in and I just was like pouring it out to her. And I just remember sitting there and I told her what had happened. And she was just as astonished as I was when I was sitting in the other office. And she was like, "I need to apologize." And she's like, "What I need to let you know is," she's like, "I usually don't make judgments about other therapists and providers," but she's like, "What happens when you are a therapist that isn't specialized in trauma and abuse? These are the kinds of things that can often happen. And when you're not specialized in trauma and abuse, you can actually actively do more harm in the office uh, for people that are coming out of these circumstances." And she's like, "Because the problem is that when you're in an abusive relationship with an abusive person, you only have the rights and entitlements that that abusive person believes that you've either earned or deserved. And
Mm.
they can revoke those at any time or, to their will. And if they don't believe that you deserve it, and if they don't believe that you've earned it,
Mm.
you have no right. You have no entitlements. And everything is about what they have the right to and everything that they're entitled to."
Ooh.
And I just remember being like, I started crying so hard, and it wasn't because of the hurt or the pain from the relationship. It was the massive relief of the fact that I didn't have to explain to her why she was wrong. Like my other therapist was wrong. It was the relief that I didn't have to give a long standard, explanation as to what I felt and thought and, all of these other things. She just knew. And she cut right to the fact and the issue that was bothering me, and she put me back together in that appointment. But that's the thing that's missing with Justin Baldoni, is that at every single point in these conversations, in the depositions, when Blake is talking, when Colleen is talking, when Jenny is talking, none of them are scared. And it's not just that they aren't scared, it's that they aren't worried about what they say,
Mm.
because their rights and their entitlements were never revoked.
Oof.
They could say what they wanted, they could speak how they wanted, and it was their discomfort wasn't because they were being harassed. Their discomfort wasn't because he was being abusive. It was because they weren't getting their way. And then when they weren't getting their way, they were just cutting him off. So they felt entitled. And it was Justin who was walking on eggshells. It was Justin who was worried about saying the wrong thing. It was Justin who was worried about setting other people off and triggering them into an escalation. So what's missing here is Justin escalating whenever he thought that his rights or entitlements were being encroached on. He was the one who was living in fear of what would happen if he said or did the wrong thing to other people.
Woo. Well, you decided to end with a mic drop. 'Cause wow. As you were describing that, I'm like, who escalated things constantly was Blake and Ryan. They constantly escalated this. We are here because they constantly escalated this. Wow, what a mic drop, Raven. What? Well, I really, really appreciate our time together because that was something to chew on. That's for sure. But wow. So y'alls, I hope you loved hearing from Raven. I felt like that last answer was such a mic drop. Something I had never thought about before, but wow. That was such an amazing insight. So Raven, I know we did this in the beginning of this episode, but at the end of it, we also like to do it, which is to remind people how to follow you, how to subscribe to you, how do they find you, how do they support you.
I'm as many different versions of Notorious Raven on pretty much all of my platforms. TikTok is Notorious Raven, all one word. YouTube is Notorious_Raven.
All right. And folks, y'all know that I was like encouraging you to follow Raven so she could get her 1,000 subscribers. She did accomplish that. However, in order to be monetized, she needs also 4,000 watch hours. And she's about like 3,000 watch hours away. And so I just really want to encourage y'all to subscribe to her if you haven't yet, but also please watch her stuff. If you got anything out of this episode, which I would be flabbergasted if you told me you did not, because I'm still sitting in with that last answer because I'm like, wow, that was some really good stuff to chew on. Like I really encourage you to check out her stuff. And so, again, hopefully the next time like Raven and I have a not the next time, but hopefully soon you'll see yourself get monetized because those watch hours have been hit. And also I just wanted to let folks know, I said this a little bit earlier today, but next Tuesday I'm going to be uploading a special episode of 17 Questions with Bocce with a new like content creator that I discovered on TikTok named Dedicated Yapper. I am trying to convince her to come to YouTube because I think her content will be amazing. And it is an amazing on TikTok. And so I would love to someday see this person on YouTube. And I honestly think she can have a great platform if she does. And then on Friday, not this Friday, obviously, because if you're watching this right now, it's Friday of the 30th of January. So next Friday, the 6th, I believe, you're going to have Carol of Docket Updates up for 17 Questions with Bocce, which I'm super, super excited about because I love Carol. She's an amazing person, as is Raven over here. So thank you again, Raven, for spending time with me tonight. It's definitely nice to have you tonight.
It's so good to be with you again. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks. And thank you for the memory, like down memory lane about.
I'm like, there's more.
There's
Don't worry,
more.
we've got more. We need to do another live again because it's been a while.
It has
Like,
been a while. My TikTok folks are like, "Did you abandon us?" And they're like, "Is it because we don't pay you over here?" And it's like, mostly it's because I can't really share screens, and a lot of the things that I do require sharing screens. But anyways, okay, folks. Hopefully you check out the playlist because there are 2 other episodes before this one, and then all the episodes that will be following afterwards. So hopefully y'all come back for the next episode. All right, thanks.
bye.